IGCSE revision population. Okay, so population density. This is the number of people living in a given area, usually per squared kilometer. So it's very easy. Like Monaco has a high population density because it's a small place and there are lots of people, so it's very dense. Think like physics. For instance, Singapore is a country with a very high population density, and Australia is a country with a very low population density. Because Australia is so large and doesn't have many people. It's underpopulated. Okay, population distribution. This is how a population is spread out around a country or an area. If a country's population is distributed in a regular pattern, then we say it has an even population distribution. So, if there are like cities every 100 meters or something, I don't know, it's obviously exaggerated, but you get what I mean. Like, it's not weird that there's like one little settlement there, one little settlement 2,000 bazillion kilometers away. That would be weird. But if a country's population is distributed regularly, then it has an even population distribution. However, if there are areas with many people and then areas with few people, then we would say that it has an uneven population distribution. Okay, the first case study we're going to have is Australia. It has a very uneven population distribution. If I was to describe the population distribution, I might say there's a high concentration of people along the east and southeast coast around Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. So for case studies, you need to really know the names of the cities and places. So, for instance, if the case study question would be describe a country's population distribution, then you would first say the country Australia, and then you would say there is a high concentration of people along the east and just say the east coast around Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. You can just say Sydney, or you can just say one of them. So high concentration of people along east coast around Sydney. Also, there's a small concentration on the southwest coast around Perth, which is a place in Australia. So high concentration of people along east and southeast coast around Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and small concentration on the southwest coast around Perth. There's a concentration of people around the coast on the island of Tasmania, I don't even know. So, yeah, there's a concentration of people around that coast. And most people live in coastal areas because, they want the beaches and stuff, and it's nice. And not many people live in the center or north of Australia. Okay. So when you describe a population, you can describe them as dense or sparse. Okay, sparse is like when not many people live in an area, like the center of Australia. So you could say the population is sparse in the center and north of Australia. But you would say that it's dense along the east and southeast coast around Brisbane or Melbourne, So anyways, so if a question only asks you to describe distribution, then you just say what you see on the map. So if this is like paper 2 or something, if they give you a diagram, then you just do that, but they usually won't. But you should try and use the words dense, sparse, even, and uneven. So yeah. But if they ask you to explain population distribution, this is not what you should say. You should just give reasons for it, okay? So here's some reasons. Firstly, what causes a sparse population? So not many people live there. Well, mountainous areas. For example, the Himalayas. It's very hard to build on them, because there are steep slopes, so it's not easy to build. Or if the area is very hot or very cold. For example, the Sahara Desert or Antarctica. People don't want to go there. A heavily forested area, the Amazon rainforest, or areas that flood a lot, or areas with no jobs, or with poor supply of electricity, gas, and water, or with poor communications, a shortage of natural resources, no schools or hospitals, areas that regularly suffer from natural disasters like volcanoes or droughts. So yeah, that's reasons why there might be a sparse population. Okay. Why would there be a dense population? Well, coastal areas that are good for fishing or trading, so places with like that, just coastal areas that border rivers, seas, or whatever. So this would result in a high population, dense population, because, you can fish, you can trade, transport, etc. Also flat land, because it's easy to build on it. And areas that are close to good supply of water, because people need to drink, fish, wash, etc. So the River Thames, or Thames, I don't even know, in London. Okay, also areas with good natural resources, like wood or good, no, ignore that, just like wood. Areas that are close to good fertile agricultural land. So if your site is close to like land that is very fertile and you can do lots of crops on it, then that's might attract lots of people, so the population will be dense because there are lots of people in the area. Okay. Or also areas with good developed transport links, like railways or roads, or I don't know, and also plenty of available jobs, available electricity and water supply, good communications like the internet and mobile phone networks, and good quality schools and hospitals. Alright. Population growth takes place when birth rates are higher than death rates. So, natural increase, basically. Very simple. And in most continents of the world, this is what is happening. The fastest rates of growth are actually happening in the poorest continents like Africa, Asia, and South America. However, in Europe, death rates are actually higher than birth rates, so natural decrease is taking place. Yeah. So below is a table listing, well, I'm about to list the reasons why birth rates are high in poorer countries, but death rates are decreasing, and also why birth rates are low in richer countries, MEDCs basically. Let's quickly go over that. Natural increase is when birth rates are higher than death rates, so more babies are born than people die, so, there's an increase. And natural decrease is when death rates are higher than birth rates, so more people die than people are born. Okay, what are birth rates? Birth rates are the number of births. Sorry, I'm so tired. It's the number of births per 1,000 of population per year. So that's a definition you should know. So if it asks what's the birth rate, you say number of birth per 1,000 of population. So it's basically how many babies are born per 1,000 of the population. Fertility rate, the average number of children a female will have in her lifetime. Okay. Death rates, the number of deaths per 1,000 of population per year. Same as birth rates, just death. Infant mortality, this is the number of deaths before the age of 1 per 1,000. For instance, if you have a baby and it's 9 months old and it dies, then that will be part of the infant mortality, okay? Then it would be 1 per 1,000. Do you see what I'm saying? But if there are like 500 of 1,000 babies that die before being 1, then it'll be 500 instead of 1. Okay, life expectancy. This is the average age that someone is expected to live within a country. Generally, women tend to live a few years longer than men. Okay, so what are some reasons for high birth rates? Firstly, lack of contraception. Like, people don't use contraception, or it's not available to them, or they can't afford it. Especially, this is the case in LEDCs. So people are more likely to become pregnant. Also, another reason for a high birth rate would be religious beliefs. For example, some religions like Roman Catholicism, they believe against contraception and abortion. So you can't abort if you're pregnant, and they don't want you to try and prevent pregnancy. Also, in societies that are agriculturally based, in the sense that, hand-to-mouth farming or even commercial farming, but in LEDCs, well, they need people to farm to help them and to collect water and stuff. So they want more children to help them on the farm to work. Also, another reason for high birth rates would be high infant mortality, because if many babies die, couples will be tempted to have more children, because then one is more likely to survive. Also, if there are no care homes or pensions, for instance, this is the case in LEDCs, so there's nowhere for the old people to go once they can't take care of themselves anymore, well, they'll need children to take care of them when they're old, okay? So that's another reason they may get lots of kids. Also, another reason for high birth rates would be if there are pro-natalist policies, so when governments are encouraging couples to have more children, such as the case in Singapore. Okay. Reasons for low birth rates. Why could birth rates be low? So this would be the case in MEDCs, it's like France or something. Okay, so firstly, contraception would be available and people could afford it, okay? and sometimes even contraception is given away freely by like programs or something. Okay, also emancipation, which means the freedom of women. Because here in MEDCs, women can be educated and they can work. Okay, so they may put their careers in front of their family life. So they're more likely to get a career than get children. And whereas in LEDCs, women don't generally work and they're not educated, so they're kind of like the moms and they clean and eat and cook and shit. Okay, and take care of the kids. So, anyways, improved levels of education, like I just said, especially in female, but also in male. People are like educated about children and using contraception and stuff, so they know about it. They're very aware of family planning, and they know like, they take everything into consideration, so they're educated. Also, reduced infant mortality. Since less children die before the age of 1, people it's very likely that your child won't die, so there's no need to get more. Also, there are many care homes and MEDCs and pensions, so money you get from the government once you're a certain age if you've been paying tax until your retirement day. Well, yeah, so you don't need kids to take care of you when you're older. Also, development of economy into secondary and tertiary sectors. So we will go into detail on this in the industry topic, but basically, since in MEDCs, people aren't doing primary sector jobs like fishing, mining, cutting down trees, that kind of shit. Well, they're doing desk jobs, so teaching, being librarians, cooking, I don't know, working in a restaurant, business managers, or I don't even know. But those kind of jobs, that means you'll be richer. So, there's a good economy going on. So they can afford children. But at the same time, that also is a thing. People may be busy and won't want kids because they want to focus on their careers. Also, children are becoming increasingly expensive, okay? To pay for school, uni, well, you don't need to pay for uni, but you need to pay for school, food, living, clothes, all that stuff. Doctors, everything. Also, nowadays, marriages are often delayed in the sense that if a couple meets when they're like 24, they may choose to get married at like 30 or 35 because nowadays people want to know each other longer before marrying, except in Las Vegas. But yeah, so marriages are delayed, and also people generally get less children. I mean, back in the days, it was very normal. For instance, in Germany, many people would have like 7 children. But now, that's very weird, who has 7 children? Now, usually maximum is like 3 or 4, but even then that's already quite a large family. Okay, so, when countries have... I'm sorry, I'm so tired. When countries have anti-natalist policies, like China, which has its one-child policies, well, this means that there'll be a low birth rate since the government encourages people to not have many children. Yeah. Okay, so again, this one's LEDCs in poorer countries. Why are the death rates high? So why do many people die? Well, maybe natural disasters happened, but this often only causes short-term increases. So like a tsunami or something. That can cause high death rates. Or conflicts and wars because people die in them. Or poor medical care, and poor hygiene and sanitation in LEDCs. Firstly, bad hygiene, they can't afford it, the toilet gets infected, bacteria, sanitation, germs, they can easily spread diseases, and since they have poor medical care or just can't afford it, they can't be helped, and this means that they'll die. Also, poor diet. Either they're eating unhealthy food, or maybe there's just not enough food. They can't afford food, in LEDCs. Or in MEDCs, people may be drinking alcohol, smoking, or taking drugs, which can kill them. Also, if people don't do a lot of exercise, well, this means they'll live not as long as others. So, or if they get obese, they get like heart disease. Also, shortage of clean water. This is again LEDCs. If people don't drink clean water, they can become sick, and once again, if they can't afford medical care, they will die. And also, this applies to anywhere, LEDCs and MEDCs diseases. So reason for high death rates would be, for instance, many people getting cancer or AIDS. So yeah. So why may there be low death rates? So if not many people die. Well, there may be immunization programs where, you get vaccinations to be immune to certain diseases like smallpox. Yeah. Also, the availability of clean water. If there's clean water, then you won't get sick. And also there's improved diet and knowledge of diet. That, for instance, you should eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables, that should say, every day. So, since more is known about how to be healthy, people in general are healthier. And also improved levels of exercise. More people exercise because we know how healthy it is for us. Or they just want to, look good. I don't even know. So, yeah, improved medical care. We see really good hospitals, so people, and also there have been advances in the medicine. Okay, 20 years ago you couldn't solve certain diseases like you can now. So yeah. Also there have been improved preventative testing for cancer. So like testing your blood or something, or dogs even. So people can be treated with like for the cancer before it kills them. Okay, now let's have some more definitions. Natural population increase. When birth rates are higher than death rates. We've already spoken about this. Anyways, we'll skip that then. A country's population can also be changed by immigration, okay, and emigration. But when there is reference to natural change, it only refers to changes caused by birth rates and death rates, okay? So, natural change is natural, okay? It's not human immigration, so ignore migration. But if it asks you for not natural increase but total population increase, then you gotta add migration as well, because that adds to the total population. Okay, the population explosion, or otherwise known as the population bomb, was the rapid growth in population, and this may refer to the rapid growth of the world's population in like 100 years ago or something, or the rapid population growth of just one country. Okay, so it's just one, there's a huge increase in population. Okay, there's a case study of this, for example, in South Africa. Despite having very high rates of HIV and AIDS, South Africa has experienced population growth over the last century. Its population has grown because of a combination of natural increase and net migration gain. So, South Africa has experienced natural increase, firstly, obviously, because birth rates have remained high, while death rates have begun to fall. So, why are there high birth rates there? Firstly, there's a lack of education about family planning. Okay, people aren't as educated about it. Secondly, there's not a lot of contraception available, or it's just too expensive. Also, there's something called polygamy, which is when you have more than one partner. Like husbands can have like 20 wives or something. So yeah, there may be polygamy in some ethnic groups. Also, it's a primary-based economy. So, people will want more kids to help them in this work, because it's very manual work. Body work. So yeah, for instance, here, since it's a case study, you always need to say place-specific places. So you would say, for example, mining for coal in the Tautona, spelled Tautona, Tautona mine in Carletonville, spelled Carletonville. So Carletonville. The Tautona mine in Carletonville. Okay, so there is a high rate also of sexual violence in South Africa. So, this may lead to unwanted pregnancies, but since some ethnic groups are against abortions, well, you gotta keep the baby. So high birth rates, dude. Okay, why are the death rates falling? Why are less people dying per 1,000 people? So, firstly, better testing for and treatment of HIV/AIDS. Less people, will die from it because, firstly, A, you can get tested and start your treatment as soon as possible, and B, people are getting richer, and or the medicine is getting more affordable. Okay, also water is getting better. Firstly, people have more access to it, and secondly, it's also cleaner. It's healthy, accessible, sanitary water. Okay, also, housing is improving. Yes, there are still a lot of informal settlements, but in general, housing is improving. So South Africa is becoming increasingly urban and, it's on the right track to becoming a good-ass country. So yeah, also, there's a better education about diets. Like, people know now they need to be more healthy and they can't just eat, like, mud or something. Also, it receives a large number of migrants from countries like Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Swaziland. I would probably just try and remember Swaziland or Zimbabwe. Seems like the easiest ones to remember, but you can just remember all of them if you want. So another reason why they have population growth is because they get migrants. So people immigrate to South Africa and emigrate from Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Swaziland. This is either because of lack of economic opportunities in these countries and or political problems. So, let's talk about population pyramids. A population pyramid shows the age and sex structure of the country, sex being the gender. It is a type of graph that is divided into males and females, and then age groups. Okay? Young dependents, which that's the number of the percentage of the population under the age of 16. So how many people, exist who are 0 to 16 years old? Well, 15.999999. Okay. Old dependents. This is the number or percentage of population over the age of 65. Okay? So what it means, the fact that they're called dependents mean that they depend on other people to pay for them, okay? They depend on the economically active, which are people, as you know, between the ages of 16 and 65. This is basically the working group, so they make money. So the young people depend on them and the old people depend on them. Okay, obviously some people stay at school past the age of 16. And some people retire before 65, and some people may work after being 65. Also, some people between those ages may be unemployed. However, when we look at the whole population, we have to look at averages, so like the norm. So yeah, the dependency ratio, this is the ratio between the amount of dependents, so adding the old and young, and the economically active. So it's how many people, for instance, if there are 2 kids and there are 10 economically active, the ratio would be 1 to 5 or 2 to 10, whichever you prefer. So yeah, but there can be problems if there are more dependents than there are economically active, such is the case in China. Anyways, population pyramids can be related blah blah blah. Yeah. So if a pyramid has a wide base, so it's wide at the bottom, it means there are high birth rates, okay? And if the groups reduce in size quickly, it indicates that there are high death rates. Also, if there are a lot of old dependents, it indicates high life expectancy. If the base curves in, it indicates falling birth rates. So, young and old populations, the dependent population. So, when you've got an aging population, this is when the proportion of old dependents is increasing. So they're getting older and there are just more of them. This happens because life expectancy increases, but also because birth rates start to fall. So it's currently happening in Japan. So a country with an aging population might have a higher death rate than you expect because old people eventually die, even if their THEIR life expectancy is high. So, what are some problems with an aging population? Well, there may be a shortage of workers because there are so many old dependents that there aren't many economically active people since birth rates have fallen. So there are not enough workers, so not enough economically active people. Also, if there are not enough workers, then there are less taxpayers, so the government receives less money. And old people tend to get more sick, so there'll be an increase in pressure on hospitals. And also, the government may need to pay for this. Also, in many countries, retired people can claim pensions off the government. So this is where the government gives them certain amounts of money so they can live. And if there are a lot of old people, this can be very, very expensive for the government. So also the government needs to provide places in care homes or provide services so people can care for themselves at home. For example, Meals on Wheels. So then, solutions to an aging population. What can you do to stop this from happening? Firstly, you can increase the retirement age. In UK, the retirement age has increased from 65 to 67. So for 2 more years, people are still economically active. There would be less old dependents. So you can increase the amount of tax charged to economically active too, so that you get more money for the government to pay for care homes and shit. Also, you can introduce private health care so that the government doesn't need to pay. For example, in the United States, they're doing that with their Affordable Care Act shit. Okay. Also, you can encourage people to have private pensions so that the government doesn't need to pay. Also, economic immigration can be encouraged to reduce the dependency ratio. So this means basically that you would give incentives to people to migrate to your country so that they can work, even though they don't come from your country. Also, if the government has a pro-natalist policy, so they want you to get more babies, so that birth rates and number of young people increase, so they can eventually go to be economically active. So yeah, that can also be a solution. So the retirement age is the age at which people officially stop working, okay? So yeah. Pensions is money that people who have retired receive from the government or from private pensions. Despite there being many problems of an aging population, there are some advantages, okay? So, for instance, there's less need to spend money on schools since there are less kids. Also, older people are less likely to commit crimes, so there'll be less crime rates. Also, old people tend to travel less, so congestion and so traffic and pollution might reduce. So, a young population, when you talk about that, you are usually referring to the young dependents, so those under the age of 16. You might refer to a young population if there are too many or too few. Both can present advantages and disadvantages. So, what's the problem if you have too many young people? Firstly, childcare has to be provided so that parents can return to work. So, like creches or daycares or nannies, all that stuff. Also, governments tend to pay so that young people can go to school. They need to pay. For example, state schools, it's the government who pays the teachers and stuff for public schools. Okay, also, young people get sick often, so the government needs to pay for healthcare if they're, insured or something. Also, there's an increase in the dependency ratio. Since there are so many young dependents, the economically active need to work more, or there need to be more taxes and stuff. So that's not a good thing. Also, there need to be teaching and nursing jobs created, which is annoying for the government. So, what are some solutions to this? So when there are too many young people, what can you do to stop this? Firstly, you can introduce anti-natalist policies, like China's one-child policy. Also, you can increase family planning. You can make contraception available and affordable. Also, if you ensure that females are educated and emancipated, so they're working and stuff, and they know all about careers and stuff, well then they're less likely to get many children, or they might put it off for a few years. Okay, but there can be the opposite problem when there aren't enough young people. So, what problems can come about because of this? Well, firstly, child-related services can be closed, like schools and nurseries, because there aren't enough kids to make it worth running. And this can lead to unemployment, because teachers will then be unemployed. Also, it means that once these young people eventually get older and move into the economically active sector, well, there's obviously a reduction in the amount of people. So again, the dependency ratio will probably increase as more people get old and less people are born. So the dependency ratio increases. So less people will be paying tax, or they may have to pay more tax, which is a problem if people are not very rich. Also, there may be an increase in the age of population, like I just said, because the people just keep growing older, so they always move up sectors, but there are less and less people coming in. So there's a higher dependency ratio. Also, sometimes birth rates, they fall below the replacement rate, which is the replacement rate is basically how many, like the rate that is needed to keep the population stable. So how many birth rates, so that the birth rates cancel out the death rates. And sometimes the birth rate can fall below this, which means that the population will decline. There'll be a population decrease. Also, in the future, there will be less people in the reproductive age range, which will mean that there'll be even further declines. So what are some solutions to having a population that is too small? Firstly, a pro-natalist policy from the government to increase birth rates. Secondly, you can subsidize childcare to make it less expensive, and education to encourage more families to have more children, because many reasons why people don't get children is because it's too expensive. Also, you can offer more services, so more kindergartens, more daycare centers, you can make nanny services cheaper, and all that yabba yabba. Okay, so a case study, Japan's aging population. So Japan has an aging population because the birth rates have fallen, and it has one of the world's highest life expectancies. Okay? So not many babies are born, but the babies that have already born, they're just getting older and older, so, the population is aging. So, for example, the islands of Okinawa, spelled Okinawa, just like you pronounce it, Okinawa. It's right off Japan's south coast. Well, they have the highest life expectancy and the greatest percentage of centenarians, which are people that are over the age of 100. So cent, 100, cent. Yeah. So Japan has the highest proportion of old dependents, about 23%, and the lowest proportion of young dependents, which is 13% in the whole world. So it's number one. And it has a total fertility rate of only 1.25. So the average woman is expected to get 1.25 babies, which doesn't really make sense, but it adds up when you do like a bigger number. So, for instance, if you have 4 people which get 1.25, then you get 5 babies. So it makes sense. You don't get a decimal baby. Okay, and this is below the replacement rate of 2.1. So to replace the population so that there's not an increase or decrease, to keep it stable, you need each woman to get like 2.1 babies. And this is, so basically the fertility rate is below the replacement rate. So, it's not good. And even though the Japanese are working longer, it may have to look outside its borders to prevent future population decline and economic decline. So, as in, they should encourage immigrants so that they can work here and, increase the economic population kind of thing. But Japan is traditionally a very closed country. So they're not so into immigration. So allowing a large-scale immigration would involve huge social and cultural changes, which can always be a problem. Okay, so now moving on. What are some pro and anti-natalist birth policies? What even is that? So a pro-natalist policy is a policy that encourages couples to have more children. You can't force people to have more children, but you can offer incentives, so things that like benefits for people who do get many children. So, for example, free childcare or even just money. You just get money for getting more babies. So, governments may have a pro-natalist policy if they have a declining population and a shortage of young dependents. So, not enough young dependents. So, low birth rates and fertility rates. A government can't force couples to have more children, so it must offer incentives. So, for example, cash payments, free healthcare or subsidized, free or subsidized education, free nurseries or subsidized childcare, reduced tax rates, child benefits like weekly or monthly payments for the children, free equipment like pushchairs, cots, or even washing machines, posters and advertising campaigns, etc. So, case study, Singapore. Singapore is a pro-natalist policy, okay? So it's a developed country in Southeast Asia with a population of about 5 million people. For many years, the Singaporean government has believed that Singapore is underpopulated, okay? So the government in Singapore thinks that Singapore has not enough people. So it's tried to increase its population. It has one of the lowest total fertility rates in the world, standing at 1.1, which is well below the replacement rate of 2.1, the same one as Japan. So, to overcome worker shortages, the Singapore government has encouraged immigration, but it is also trying to increase the population through raising birth rates. The government is doing this in a number of ways. Firstly, it's increased maternity leave by 50% to 12 weeks, and it will cover the cost of maternity leave, so the cost to the parents of employers, for the first 4 babies. So basically, they say that when you're pregnant and as a female and you're working, even for males, you get to leave 50% longer. Like you get a break, you usually say it was like 6 weeks or something. Well, they increased it by 50%, which would then be 9 weeks, but not 12, but you get my point. They increased maternity leave by 50%. And yeah. And you will be paid while you're leaving, by the way. Yeah, so the Singapore government is also increasing child benefits paid to families. Okay? So Singapore government will pay more money for the children to people if they get more kids. So the government will pay money into a special bank account of nearly $1,000 for 6 years. Okay? Yeah. So the Singapore government has also sponsored dating organizations to encourage people to get married earlier and start having children. So yeah, if Singapore's policies are not successful, it will eventually become increasingly dependent on foreign workers. So there will gradually be an increase in the dependency ratio and ultimately economic decline. So, what's an anti-natalist policy? It's a policy that attempts to reduce birth rates. This might be through better education and supply of contraception, or through much stricter policies, like China's one-child policy. Okay, so China's anti-natalist policy case study. So firstly, China was overpopulated in the past. Yeah, so resources couldn't match the population. There were just too many people and not enough food, water, etc. So China had to do something. They had to introduce an anti-natalist policy to reduce the birth rates, to reduce the population. So the policy China decided to introduce was really, really strict, and it probably wouldn't have worked in a country that wasn't communist. But China was communist, so they could force the people to do it. So basically, the government stated that all couples were only allowed to have one child. They increased the age for men to marry to 22. To get married and to have a child, citizens had to apply to the government. So they made literally, if you want to get married, you have to be 22. So most people, example, religious people, won't want children before being married. So if they have to wait longer to be married, less kids. Also, if you wanted to be married, you needed, and to have a children, you needed to apply to the government. It's kind of like applying for a visa. You needed the government to say, yes, you can get married and you can have a child. And if you applied by these rules, you were entitled to free education, healthcare, housing, and you were given a job. So, people would want to follow these rules since they would get lots of benefits. They wouldn't have to pay for their education. It was free. They wouldn't have to pay for their healthcare, housing, and they were given a job. So this was fantastic. But if you didn't follow the rules, then benefits would be removed. So you wouldn't get these benefits, and females who were found to be pregnant without being allowed to were given forced abortions and even sterilized like animals. So yeah, to enforce the policy, the government relied on community enforcement. Often elderly residents who were trusted within the community were asked to inform okay? So mostly old ladies would be called the granny police, and they would tell the government if women are being pregnant when they're not allowed to. So, kind of like the secret police in Hitler's Germany. So, yeah. So, these old people, mostly ladies, they were called the granny police, and they would report if there are bad pregnancies, and then, the government would force them to get abortions or be sterilized. But the strict enforcement of this policy led to a problem because many people were killing their babies if they were female. So this is called female infanticide. So this is when you kill female babies because couples favored male children. Males ensured the family name was maintained. So, when you get married, it's the men who keep the name, not the women. And men are also able to work manual jobs because they're generally stronger than females. So they can mine, whereas women probably couldn't. And also, females would be lost after marriage because they would go to live with their husband's family. But males would always kind of pay for you and, that kind of thing. There were a number of exceptions to this rule, though. If you had twins or triplets, it was fine. Wait. No, if you had twins or triplets, because you're only allowed to have one kid, that's okay. They're not going to kill them, okay? But another exception was if you had a first child and it had a physical or mental disability, so, if it couldn't talk or it had, like, autism or had Down syndrome or something, then you were allowed to have a second child, okay? Also, people in rural areas, so places where you farm, so in the countryside, families were often allowed a second child, just because they're not really that important. And they make their own food, so they're not really a problem. Also, ethnic minorities were allowed a second, and often couples who bribed officials could have a second. So yeah. So successes and failures of this policy. Well, the policy had been relatively successful. Birth rates had fallen off from a peak of 44 just to 12. And China's population is also expected to peak in the next 20 years and then slowly start to decrease. Because of its success, there have been further relaxations, including all families in females areas can have two, ignore that. I'm not sure what that's supposed to say. 2 people who marry from single children families are allowed 2 children. So if you're an only child and your husband is an only child, well then you can have 2 children. Also, when females are better educated about contraception, they're free to make their own choices. So sometimes they don't even want to get children. Whereas in the old times, they couldn't really decide. Yeah. Also, there are a few problems with this thing. Firstly, China is still overpopulated. There are too many people living there. So, yeah, but they haven't really solved the problem why they actually initially introduced the policy for. Also, there is a male-female imbalance in the population. There are more men than there are girls, because back in the days, people would kill females because they wanted men. So this creates a lot of social tension because, there's pressure for you to get married, but you know that not all men can be married, whereas because there are more men than females. So some men will not be married. So it's very competitive. So yeah, people are also demanding greater freedom and choice. People aren't really happy with this policy. If they want to get more children, then they want to, but they just literally can't because their government will say no. Also, China will slowly get an aging population. So where there are less people born and lots of people are just getting older and older. So there are not many people who are economically active. Also, there will be a large number of abandoned children since in case you one time don't use contraception or something with your partner, you already have a child, then you get pregnant again, well, people may just abandon their kids. They'll just leave them in the street so that they don't need to pay for the price. As in, paying a fine or something. Okay, overpopulation, underpopulation, and optimum population. So, firstly, let's define some of these things. Overpopulation is when there are more people than there are resources available. So it might lead to unemployment, famine, and homelessness because there aren't enough houses, not enough jobs, and not enough food. Underpopulation is when there are not enough people to fully maximize the potential of a country. For example, there might be too many jobs or too many resources that can't be exploited. For example, if you have lots of coal or gold or something, there are not enough people to exploit them. So optimum population is when population and resources are perfectly matched. It's optimal, okay? But in reality, this is almost impossible to achieve because it's pretty difficult. Okay, the carrying capacity. This is the amount of people that the resources of a country can support. So, the carrying capacity of a country can change with improvements in technology, for example, desalination of water, discoveries of new resources, or the loss of existing resources, like a volcanic eruption destroying farmland. This means that, less people there's a smaller carrying capacity. Okay. What are some problems of overpopulation? Firstly, there could be unemployment because there are not enough jobs for everyone. There could be not enough schools and hospitals, not enough houses, and so informal settlements will grow, like camps, squatter camps for, slums, because there aren't enough houses. Also, there may be a traffic congestion increase since there are more cars, buses, etc. on the road. Also, prices may increase as more people want houses, resources, etc. So it's basically inflation. Since there are more people than there are things, so things will become more expensive. So also there may be a shortage of clean drinking water and electricity, because there are so many people. Also there will be an increase in air, noise, and water pollution. Because, more people equals more pollution. Also the rural-urban fringe may be damaged as informal settlements are built. However, there's also the opposite one, underpopulation. So what are some problems with that? Firstly, not enough workers, less people will pay tax, so schools and hospitals may close because there aren't enough people going there. Also, public transport links might close because there aren't enough customers to make it worth it. Also, there may be less innovation and development. So, less innovation means that less people will invent shit, so there will be like a stagnant economy. For instance, in the USA, there's very good kind of population, so there's a lot of innovation in the sense that lots of people can invent stuff. There are young people, but when there is an underpopulated country, there aren't as many people, and chances are, they are probably older, so they are less likely to invent new, young, hip, modern things. Do you see what I'm saying? Also, when a country is underpopulated, you can't exploit all the resources because there just aren't enough people. Also, it's harder to defend the country if you don't have many people to be in the army or something. Also, it means that you need to attract migrants, which can often be a costly affair. For instance, you need to give people incentives, so reasons to come here, benefits, so often these involve money. So not good for the government, since they're already not getting a lot of tax, so they're not doing very well. Okay. We're nearing the end. I'm so tired. Okay. HIV/AIDS. HIV is transmitted through infected bodily fluids, like blood, semen, and breast milk. So yeah, blah blah blah. So the most common ways of transmitting it is A, unprotected intercourse with someone who has HIV, sharing needles with an HIV person, which often happens with drug users. Also, receiving a blood transfer from infected blood, and breastfeeding or mother to unborn child, because if the mother has HIV, well, the child can get HIV too. Okay. Africa is the continent that has been hit hardest by HIV. As you can see 15% of adult population in southern Africa suffer from HIV. And in countries like Botswana, 40% do. However, even with these high figures, the true figures might be a lot higher because not everyone has been tested. So, causes of HIV rates. So why might a lot of people have HIV? Firstly, if there's a lack of education about it, so people don't really know about why it happens, how to get it, and how not to get it. They don't know how it's transmitted and they don't know how to prevent it. Also, sometimes contraception isn't available and it's not affordable. So, or people don't know how to use them. So that means that there's a high rate. Also, polygamy, which is when you take more than one wife. So this means that if one of them has it, the male will get it, and then all his wives will get it. Also, if the male has it, or the mom has it, if the male has it, and then he gives it to all the moms, then all their children will have it too. Also, lack of testing. A lot of the population doesn't know that it has HIV, so it'll just keep giving it on to other people, Also, prostitution. Many prostitutes are infected but don't know, so continue to transmit the disease. Sexual crime. There's a high rate of sexual crime in South Africa, which helps spread the disease. Also, urban myth. Many uneducated people believe myths about HIV that are untrue. For example, some people believe that taking a shower after sex would reduce chance of catching HIV. So, yeah. Migrant population. When a lot of people move for work, HIV can be spread easily between communities. For example, say, like, I go to Africa and then I get AIDS, but I don't really know, and I come back to France and then I give other people AIDS. So it spreads with migration. Okay, religious beliefs. Some religions don't even allow contraception, so, that could be a problem. But at the same time, religions also discourage intercourse before marriage and promote only one sexual partner, so husband and wife, so it's not really a major one, but it is still one. Also, poor medical hygiene, possibly dirty medical equipment and untreated blood that can cause high HIV rates. What is the impact of HIV? Well, individually, people will experience a decline in their immune system, so their immune system is less strong, so they will become sicker and possibly die. Also, it's very expensive to treat HIV and AIDS, both for the government and for the people who need to pay if it's not government paid, if it's private. Also, there will be an increase in the dependency ratio because less people will be able to work because of sickness. So less people will be working because they're sick. They'll be dependent on the economically active. Also, the country may see a reduction in tourism and investment as people are reluctant to travel to a country with high infection rates. Like, you wouldn't want to go to a country that has a lot of HIV and stuff. So, yeah, this means that less money will be in the country. So, the country will also have to pay large amounts of money to buy antiretroviral drugs, which isn't even a cure, but it helps support victims' immune system to stop them getting sick from other things. Also, life expectancy rapidly reduces in countries with high infection rates and death rates will increase. Also, a large number of orphans will kind of be created as a result of this because many parents will die, so many kids will be like alone. And often there are not enough care workers or hospitals or anything or orphanages for these orphans to be taken care of, so they might just become homeless. Yeah, so also there's a shortage of workers since more people are not working because they're sick. So that can lead to economic decline and food shortages. There may not be enough essential workers like teachers if everyone is not working because of it. What are some solutions to HIV? Well, firstly, you can provide free contraception and you can educate people about how to use them correctly. Also, you must educate people about what HIV is and explain how it's spread and how it can be stopped. Because many people in rural Africa may be illiterate, so they can't read. So education may have to be done through images on posters or theater like drama to act it out because they can't read. Also, there should be more tests to find out who is infected so they can try and stop infecting others. Also, you should legalize prostitution to encourage more prostitutes to be tested and then to hopefully reduce the spread of HIV. Also, antiretroviral drugs can be sold cheaper so that more people can, afford them and have access to them because then there'll be less people dying from it. Hopefully, scientists will eventually find a cure for HIV, so it can be eliminated. So also the government should maybe invest in this for scientists to find a cure. Also, you could encourage abstaining from sex before marriage so that you try to reduce the number. And also you might want to try to reduce the number of sexual partners per person so that, there's no polygamy, so that it's a monogamous society, so only one partner. Also, you should try to reduce the stigma of HIV/AIDS so more people talk about it and are happy to be tested. Because often people associate it, with bad things. And they're like, ew, I don't have HIV. No, I don't want to be tested. I don't have it. And if there's no stigma, then people can just talk about it and be like, oh yeah, dude, I had HIV, man. Sick, me too, that kind of thing. Last case study. So, AIDS, HIV in Botswana. 5,800 people died from HIV/AIDS in 2010 in Botswana. Also, antiretroviral drugs are very expensive. Okay? And people may be ill, so they can't contribute to economy. So if the question on the case study is what is the impact of HIV in a country, we'll say Botswana first. 5,800 people died in 2010 because of it in Botswana. Also, antiretroviral drugs are very expensive, so many people can't afford it. Also, so people may be ill, so they won't be able to contribute to economy, which means that there will be severe reductions in in wealth of individual families. So there will be less money for healthcare or education. And also, there will be many AIDS orphans and not enough care workers to take care of them. And also, here for the case study, you always need to say names. So the incidence of HIV was very high in mining towns like Salive Figze, which was 52% who tested HIV positive in 2003. So to remember the name, think of the word saliva, except no A's. You replace all the A's with E. So salive, salive, but it's E's, not A's. And also figde, just think of how a Chinese person would say fuck you. They'd be like figde, spelled Phickze. Figde, salive figze. If that makes sense. Saliva figze. So just remember, saliva fuck you. Salive figze. 52% who tested HIV positive in 2003. Okay, another case study. What are some problems that can be caused by overpopulation? Well, in Bangladesh, a problem that can, occur is traffic congestion. Too many cars could be on the roads. Okay? For example, like in the city Dhaka, spelled Dhaka. Also, there may be an overuse of agricultural land on the floodplains of the Ganges, so there may be a loss of soil fertility. Moreover, there may be widespread deforestation when there are too many people on the slopes of the Himalayas, which is never good, which can even lead to desertification. Also, if there's a lack of work, so not enough jobs, well, that can lead to poverty. Also, inadequate food supply, since there are too many people, there's not enough food. This can result in malnutrition. Also, there's not good access to education, since A, people don't have jobs, so they're poor, and B, there are too many people for the schools. So people will remain unqualified, which means that even if there were jobs, they couldn't even take them because they're not qualified to take them because they don't have an education. Also, there's a poor access to healthcare, not only because they can't afford it, but also because there just are too many people. So this means that there will be high death rates. Also, housing will be overcrowded because there aren't enough houses. So this will often lead to inadequate basic amenities. For example, there aren't toilets, or they're dirty, or not enough water, that kind of stuff. No beds, no rooms, Yeah.